Breaking news today, the first major news conference by Vladimir Putin since the invasion is scheduled for May 1st. According to Kyiv, 42 Russian drones attacked southern Ukraine overnight. Russian forces launched dozens of drones designed by Iran towards the southern city of Odessa in Moscow's latest overnight barrage, which wounded 11 people. On Thursday, Ukraine announced that its air defense systems had shot down these drones. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that 42 enemy attack UAVs were launched, with 41 of those drones being destroyed. The drones were deployed from Russian-controlled territory, including the Crimean Peninsula, which Moscow annexed in 2014. According to AFP, a dorm in Odessa was damaged by falling debris. According to Governor Oleg Kuiper, 11 individuals, including 3 children, sustained injuries. The attack on Odessa was initiated by Russian devils for the second consecutive evening, he added. Russia announced on Thursday that its air defense systems had shot down 9 drones from Ukraine en route to the capital, just hours before President Vladimir Putin's much-anticipated news conference since the offensive in Ukraine began in February 2022. Moscow and Kaluga regions were the sites of the destruction and interception of 9 Ukrainian UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, stated Russia's Defense Ministry, which placed the blame on Kyiv. At the beginning of a 2-day summit on Thursday, EU leaders struggled to keep their 2 most basic promises to a war-torn Ukraine: to provide the country with the means to resist Russia's invasion and to offer the country hope that it can join the rich bloc in the future. Surprisingly, according to AP, the rising recalcitrance of its member Hungary poses an internal threat to that commitment rather than an external one. Viktor Orbán, Prime Minister of Hungary, arrived at the summit pledging to halt his 26 fellow leaders' plans to formally announce that membership negotiations with Ukraine can begin and, more urgently, to withhold €50 billion, $54 billion, £43 billion in desperately needed financial aid from Kyiv. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is facing a particularly precarious situation as he returns from a visit to Washington, D.C., where his requests for additional aid from the U.S. Congress were ignored. There was no official confirmation early on Thursday that he would attend, but it was widely expected that he would come to Brussels to make his case heard here as well. "We must ensure fiscal stability, particularly in light of the disappointment with the U.S., stated an anonymous high-ranking EU diplomat, speaking before summit negotiations. Brief introduction. Here you can find up-to-the-minute coverage of the conflict in Ukraine right here in The Guardian. President Vladimir Putin of Russia is expected to hold his annual press conference at the end of the year, following the cancellation of last year's planned event. Along with questions posed by journalists, Russian citizens will also be able to submit their queries through phone. In 2021, when Russia was allegedly about to invade Ukraine, he held his last news conference. Following the outbreak of hostilities in Ukraine, Putin severely curbed his contacts with international news outlets. It takes place as the European Union prepares for a meeting where Prime Minister Viktor Orbán of Hungary is expected to face off against his counterpart, amid his threats to veto a large aid package and initiate membership talks for Ukraine. As concerns grow over Western support for Ukraine, almost 2 years into Russia's conflict, the crucial summit in Brussels is expected to go on for longer than the 2 days originally scheduled, according to diplomats, after Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, failed in Washington to win over Republican lawmakers who blocked U.S. support. Kyiv is frantically trying to change the narrative. Ukraine is hoping to join the EU and receive €50 billion, $54 billion in financial aid, but Orbán, Russia's closest ally in the EU, is standing in their way. Also overnight, Moscow claimed to have shot down 2 drones that were aiming at the Russian capital. Reports of casualties or damage did not materialize. Additionally, 9 drones were shot down over the Moscow region and the neighboring Kaluga region, according to the Russian Defense Ministry, as reported by the RIA news agency. There was no breakdown provided. Important advancements. On December 14, Russia's President Vladimir Putin will likely hold his yearly press conference to wrap up the year. At the event, there will be a call-in feature called the Direct Line where Russians can ask Putin for advice. The results of the year will be summarized by Vladimir Putin on December 14. The format will be a hybrid of the president's final press conference and the Direct Line, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Thursday. Minutes after Volodymyr Zelensky met with U.S. counterpart Joe Biden for talks in Washington, D.C., Russia fired a barrage of missiles at Kyiv in the early hours of Wednesday, seemingly as a display of strength. While Ukraine's air defenses successfully intercepted and destroyed all 10 Russian missiles aimed at the capital, falling debris injured at least 53 people. Zelensky stated that Orbán lacked the authority to obstruct Ukraine's admission to the European Union in the days leading up to Thursday's leaders' summit. "I told it like it was. The EU membership of Ukraine is something he has no grounds to oppose. Just give me one reason," I begged him. According to Zelensky, he is still waiting for an answer following his brief meeting with Orbán in Argentina on Sunday. Andriy Yermak, chief of staff to Zelensky, echoed this sentiment, saying that the European Union should see much to offer Ukraine. According to Russian ideology and values, Ukraine is an undeniable European country, which is why our country was attacked by Russia. He firmly believed that the Europe puzzle would not be complete without Ukraine. Vladimir Putin's apathy on Ukraine was unacceptable, according to Poland's new Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who arrived at the summit in Brussels. The new foreign minister, Radoslaw Sikorski, emphasized that the support of Ukraine would be a priority for the incoming administration, despite the fact that the previous government of Poland was involved in a fight with Ukraine over grain exports. Unannounced meetings between the 5 Nordic nations in Oslo assured Zelensky that his country would have their support for as long as it takes in its fight to expel Russian forces. 5 Nordic countries, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, have pledged €11 billion in aid to Ukraine since Russia's invasion in February 2022 and are prepared to keep providing substantial military, economic, and humanitarian support, according to a joint statement. A new support package for Ukraine, valued at €1 billion, $1.08 billion, will be presented to Parliament on Thursday by the Danish government, according to Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, who made the announcement at a press conference in Oslo with the Nordic leaders and Zelensky. A day after its networks were knocked out by a major cyber attack, Kyivstar, the leading mobile phone operator in Ukraine, began restoring voice services to some clients, according to CEO Alexander Komarov. Data and other services will be restored later. Over half of Ukraine's population relies on the services provided by the company, which Komarov described as the biggest cyber attack on telco infrastructure in the world. The attack on Tuesday caused huge damage to the company, according to Reuters. The cyber attack was attributed by a hacking group that Kyiv believes is linked to Russian military intelligence. A group known as Solntsepyok claimed responsibility for the cyber attack in a post on the messaging app Telegram. The group also shared screenshots that seemed to indicate that the hackers had gained access to Kyivstar's servers.